Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wa rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome everybody that's watching to our third and final webinar of the weekend. My name is Usman. I'll be your host for tonight. Um, Tonight's talk is going to be titled A Ramadan in Quarantine, How to Set Realistic Goals, Proper Scheduling, and Having a Fire Ambition. Inshallah, tonight we will be joined by Ustadh Omar Usman. He worked professionally as a technical consultant. He is a certified project manager and a John Maxwell, certified leadership trainer. He is also a founding member of Muslim Matters, which is an online magazine, and also one of the founding members of Column Institute as well. Um, Sheikh Omar is going to go ahead and talk for a little bit, and then at the end, we're going to grab some questions from Facebook as well as YouTube, and then we would have a question and answer session at the end. So please ask your questions, and then we'll make sure to get them answered. Without further ado, Sheikh Omar, the mic's yours.
All right, Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, on the topic of Ramadan and quarantine and the situation that we're in, I wanted to start by sharing a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he walked into the masjid one time and he saw a companion just sitting there. And this was a time in between prayers when the masjid normally would be empty. And so he sees this companion sitting there, and it's quite obvious from his body language, from the expression on his face, that something's bothering him. Something is wrong, right? You know, when you see someone that's dealing with a particular problem or situation, you can see it on their face that something's clearly bothering this person. So he asks him what the matter is, and this companion, radiallahu anh, he replies that he's become he's become overwhelmed and burdened by his financial debt, the amount of money that he owes to people. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught him a dua. He said, "Can I teach you something by which Allah will alleviate your debts?" And he taught him this dua: Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wal-ajasi wal-kasal wal-jubni wal-bukhl wa darda idaini wa ghalabat rijal. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you. I seek your protection from anxiety, sorrow, weakness and laziness, miserliness and cowardice, the burden of debts, and from being overpowered by men. And what's interesting is that this dua contains a number of different emotions that all end up, someone that's dealt with debt knows that all of those emotions are a consequence of that one problem. When someone is burdened with that one issue, they start to feel all of these different things. And one thing about the situation that we're in with this COVID-19 crisis, with this, coronavirus pandemic, however we want to label it, but it's an all-encompassing problem. It is a something that causes a lot of stress. And if we look at what that hadith mentions, it mentions anxiety. And we feel anxiety. We're worried about catching the virus. We feel anxiety about not knowing when things are going to end, if they're going to go back to normal, being away from loved ones, being away from friends, being away from our community. The dua, in that dua, he teaches him to seek refuge from not just anxiety but sorrow and grief. People are feeling a lot of grief, especially those who have loved ones or family members that have gotten the virus or even passed away. Weakness, this feeling of weakness also comes when we feel this type of an overwhelming stress because we're not in control. Someone that normally is accustomed to being in control of their situation, now they feel less job security. They feel less safety and security and strength about their business. The dua seeks refuge from laziness. When you're dealing with a big problem, you can get into a funk, for lack of a better term, and you it becomes hard to do things because the stress is so overwhelming. The dua seeks refuge from miserliness, from stinginess, because when people feel uncertain, when they feel afraid, when they feel anxious, they tend to withdraw. And again, that word comes in the dua, cowardice. They shrink, they withdraw, they're afraid of what might happen. So even a person that might normally be generous, they might normally be very giving, because of the situation that they're in, they might withdraw. They might say, I've got a lot, I don't know what the future holds. I need to now prioritize myself over everything else. And the dua seeks refuge from the burden of debts and being overpowered by men. And we see this now with people being afraid of perhaps losing their homes, losing their business, or having to lay people off. So there's a lot of worry, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety. And it's important to recognize that reality and acknowledge that this is the situation that we're in, and a lot of people are dealing with this. But one thing that's important about this dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that when he saw this person dealing with this issue, he didn't discount those feelings or discount that struggle, but he recognized the impact of the situation that he was dealing with and the feelings and the emotions that may come along with that problem that that person is dealing with. And he taught the companion both a way to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a way to actually alleviate and solve the situation that he was in by making that dua. So it's with that stage, it's with that setting that now we see, inshallah, the blessing of Ramadan coming upon us, and may Allah allow us all to live to see Ramadan and to benefit from Ramadan. But this Ramadan, now understanding that reality that this Ramadan is coming in a different setting, we don't feel that same, we feel a sense of excitement, but it's a different sense of excitement, right? We're missing out on the things that traditionally, a lot of things that would happen at the beginning of the month. Maybe the preparations that we're making are different, the plans that we're making are different. We're thinking a lot about some of the things that we're going to miss. We're going to miss perhaps seeing family members. We're going to miss maybe having iftar with our friends. We're going to miss being in the masjid, praying in congregation, seeing people at the masjid, talking with them. And so there's a lot of things that are going to be different. And with things being different, it presents a different challenge, but it also presents a different focus. And so, there's this concept in sports that you take what the defense is giving you. So if you're a basketball team, for example, that shoots a lot of three pointers and the defense is guarding the 3 point line, you're going to start going and getting layups. If you're playing football and the defense is tightening down on your running game, you're going to end up passing the ball. So when one thing gets locked down, something else gets opened up. And so with these challenges and with these differences in this month of Ramadan, our focus is almost being shifted a certain way. And we're being told that, okay, all of these other elements might be changing, they might be different, they might not be there this time that you're normally used to. But that means that your focus, your attention, and your energy is going to shift into a different direction. And so the question really becomes, how do we take advantage of the direction that we're being pushed in, and how do we use it to our advantage? And in order to do that, there's two very quick disclaimers that I'd like to mention. The first is that one thing that needs to underlie our approach when we're looking at, okay, this Ramadan is going to be different, how do we handle it? One underlying premise has to be a sense of optimism, in the sense that a believer in their heart, they know that Allah decrees whatever is best for the servant out of his wisdom and out of his mercy and out of his power. And so whatever restraints there are, whatever obstacles there may be, whatever changes there is a wisdom and there is a mercy that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second disclaimer is, given the situation that we're in, give yourself a level of grace, have a level of mercy with yourself. And the way that you do that is making sure that you're treating this Ramadan differently, not just from your own previous Ramadans, right? It's not going to be an apples to apples comparison to, well, last Ramadan I did this, this, and this. Therefore, this Ramadan, now I need to do these things. And especially don't compare your Ramadan to anybody else's. And so that's going to be a little bit of a trap, because every time we log in online, every time we look at social media, Every time you look at Instagram, you're going to see people doing all types of things, and you're going to start to feel that your Ramadan is inadequate. And so you have to be very careful about not comparing your Ramadan to anybody else's, but it's more, I'm in the situation that I'm in. How do I now make the most of this month? And the fact that I have that optimism, the fact that I understand that Allah decrees out of His mercy and His wisdom this particular situation, almost by definition, it means that I have the ability, I have the potential to come out on the other side of Ramadan much improved, having raised my iman, having come much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than I entered the month, and perhaps making even more of a lasting change than I have in previous Ramadans. And so the question becomes then, well, how do we actually implement that? How do we actually accomplish that? And so the theme that I want people to think about, the theme that I want you to have in mind is a theme of barakah, a theme of blessing. Barakah basically being when something is able to do a lot more because Allah put something into it. And so when you have barakah in your wealth, your money goes a lot farther, right? You experience less loss. When there's barakah in your time, you get more done even in a limited amount of time. And so this month, not only is Ramadan a month of barakah, not only does Ramadan contain the night that is the most blessed night, but it is the month, obviously, in which the most blessed book, the Quran, was revealed. And so, how we make this a month of blessing and a month of barakah, I want to direct our focus, direct our attention and our energy to one mindset, one value, and one ritual, one overall way of thinking, one value that's going to guide us, and one action that we focus on. And by keeping that limited focus and doubling down on that focus, we can make it a month that is full of blessing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Quran. I'm sorry, tells us about the month of Ramadan. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those before you, so that you may attain taqwa, a consciousness of Allah, being conscious of Allah and acting accordingly. And so this is our mindset. Our baraka mindset, our mindset that brings us this blessing, is this idea of taqwa. And this is the entire purpose of fasting. Taqwa is something that we know. It encompasses all aspects of life, the way that we deal with people, the way that we are in private, so on and so on and so on. Traditionally in Ramadan, our taqwa is, experienced in multiple facets of life. So we have taqwa while we're at work, while we're out and about, while we're at the store, while we're in our place of business. There's a lot of things going on in our life that we have to exercise taqwa in. One consequence of being quarantined or being in this phase of social distancing is that when we think about taqwa now, our taqwa is going to be honed, is going to be focused in on your taqwa in private and your taqwa with your family or at home. And so we're getting extra time now, in a sense, to focus on cultivating our sense of taqwa with how we are in our private relationship with Allah. Traditionally in Ramadan, the masjid, it's obviously it's a blessing, but we go to the masjid and we're able to pray Isha in a congregation. We're able to pray Tarawih in congregation. We're able to do all of these things, and we have that support system. Whereas we know that if we were left alone, we might not be performing at that same level. And so now this Ramadan, it presents an opportunity, and it is a challenge for some people, because some people, they thrive on that sense of community. Some people, they might thrive on the sense of being alone or being in isolation. It depends on your personality type. But the mindset of taqwa and looking at, where is my time now being focused? All of my time is at home. So I'm with my family and I'm alone by myself. And I need to double down on my taqwa in those aspects. And in the famous hadith of Jibril, we know when Jibril came and asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Tell me your religion." He said the religion is the five pillars: your shahada, your prayer, your fasting, your hajj, and your zakat. And then he said, what is ihsan? What is excellence? And he said, it is to worship Allah as if you see him, even though obviously you don't see him, but you know that he sees you. And so when we talk about excelling, when we talk about doing better, when we talk about maximizing this month, what it really means is that you're taking this basic concept of taqwa that we're all familiar with, but you're executing on that, you're practicing that taqwa at a much higher level. And so you're becoming more and more focused in your worship. Because now you can't worship in congregation. You're being forced to worship at home. You're doing your extra prayer at home. And so now you're able to gauge for yourself, how much Quran am I going to read? How much am I going to pray? Am I watching what I'm saying in terms of the messages that I'm exchanging throughout the day, the people that I'm talking to, all of these things? By being at home, we're getting a little bit of a lens. We're able to magnify our focus on how we practice that sense of taqwa. And the more that we cultivate that sense of taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And if the people of the towns had believed and had taqwa, certainly we should have opened for them blessings from the heaven and the earth. So this fasting that we do, the fasting that we're doing throughout the day, it should be instilling in us that sense of God consciousness, that Allah is watching us, and I should therefore act accordingly. For a lot of people, if they struggle with particular sins, for example, that they commit in the privacy of their own home, or they commit sins that no one else knows about, now in this time of quarantine is again an opportunity to exercise that taqwa and to pay attention to those types of things, such that we can unlock and open those blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the mindset that we have to bring blessing into this month is the mindset of taqwa. That everything that I do, everything that I'm thinking about all day is framed in the sense of having a taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the second thing is the value. What are we going to value in this month such that it helps to guide our actions? And that value that we need to have is consistency. So taqwa as a general mindset, but the value that's driving our action now is going to be consistency. Committing to doing small deed or committing to doing consistent actions and habits, even if they're small. There's this idea that in order to become extraordinary, you have to master the ordinary. In order to become extraordinary, you have to master the ordinary. And this holds true in almost anything that we look at. For example, if you ask someone, how do I maintain a car? How do I make sure that my car runs for a really long time, like 200 or 300,000 miles? And they'll tell you that in order to make your car last that long, you have to be relentless about the basics, getting your oil changed on time, getting your car serviced at the appropriate intervals, making sure that you rotate your tires regularly, so on and so on and so on. If you ask a dentist, what is the key to good oral hygiene? It's going to be brush your teeth and floss your teeth twice a day, every single day. And so to excel at something means that you do the basics really, really, really well. Again, to use a sports analogy, if you take baseball, for example, what's the batting average of a Hall of Famer versus an average player, right? A Hall of Famer might bat 330 or 350, an average player might bat 250. And the difference between the two is that one is a Hall of Famer. They get multi-million dollar endorsement deals. They get all types of extra benefits and fame and recognition, and they're superstars, and people buy their jerseys, and they get shoe endorsements. And the other person is just an average player on the roster. But when you break down the numbers, it's not that the Hall of Famer is, getting all these extra home runs and this and that. It's just that on a weekly basis, with the number of games that they play and the number of at bats that they have, they're hitting the ball a few times more than the other person. They're not doing anything extraordinary, but it's those basics that they're doing. They're just doing them a whole lot better than everybody else. And so when it comes to this, particularly this month, when we have that time, when we have that focus, it should be, what can I commit to consistently? whether it's my dua, whether it's giving in charity, it's my extra prayer, but whatever it is that I'm doing, I need to make sure that I'm consistent with it. Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that what is the best deed that I can do, and he said that which is small but consistent. And the fascinating thing to me about this particular hadith is that someone like Aisha radiallahu anha, we would expect that when she's asking what's the best deed, that the answer for her would be, well, instead of praying a third of the night, pray 2/3 of the night, or instead of doing this massive good deed that you're already doing, like double it and add more. But someone of that caliber, someone of that status is being told that the best thing that you can do is that which is small but consistent. And we know that when we do something small and consistent, that it brings, again, it brings a certain amount of barakah, it brings a certain amount of blessing. There's the very famous story of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal when the story goes that he was traveling and he came and he found a masjid and he was going to stay the night. And the caretaker of the masjid said, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" He said, "Well, I'm a traveler. I'm a guest. I'm here to stay." And he said, "No, you can't stay in the masjid. You have to leave." And so he goes, "Okay." Well, he goes outside and he goes, "Well, what if I just sleep outside the masjid?" And the guy says, "No, you can't stay here." And so they start going back and forth. And it's nighttime, so there's not a lot of visibility. A man with a bakery shop, he overhears this commotion. He makes out that there's someone here basically that needs a place to stay. So he goes and he says, "Oh, you're traveling, you need a place to stay, come to my house." So Imam Ahmed says, "Okay." So Imam Ahmed goes to this baker's house, and this man, as he's doing basic hospitality, he's laying out a place for him to sleep. He's preparing some food, making sure that he's taken care of. And Imam Ahmed says that I noticed that this man is constantly making istighfar. He's just constantly asking Allah for forgiveness. And so he goes, the next morning, I asked him, I said, you're constantly making istighfar. You must have noticed some type of benefit as a result of doing this. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep doing it. And he says, yes. He goes, actually, I've noticed that the more that I do this, all the things that I make dua for, one way or another, they get answered. He goes, except for one. And so naturally he says, well, which one? He goes, I've been making dua that one day I get to meet this great scholar, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And he says that your dua was answered, even if I had to be dragged into your house for it to be answered. But the idea being that what this man did that created so much blessing and barakah in his life was he was focused in on this one small good deed. So even as he was doing his household chores, right? He's making a place for him to sleep. He's preparing food for him. He's doing these general hospitality type of things. But while he's doing them, he's locked in on this very small, very easy to do deed that he does consistently over and over and over again. And so we find a lot of blessing from doing something like that. Now, one thing that I want to mention, one thing that I want to, say that we should be or take a warning of is not to confuse motion for action. And this is an especially pertinent warning in this month when we're quarantined, because one thing that's going to happen as a result of us being quarantined in Ramadan is we're going to have a lot of motion. And so what I mean by motion is this, is that you're going to take out your phone and you're going to see one Islamic person post, something motivational. You're going to see someone else going live and you're going to watch their live broadcast for 2 or 3 minutes. Someone's going to send you something on WhatsApp and you're going to forward it to 2 or 3 other groups. You're going to see this cool thing on Facebook and you're going to reshare it. You're going to scroll through Twitter. You're going to see this, Islamic quote. You're going to retweet that quote. You're going to see someone post something cool on Instagram. You're going to, like that post on Instagram. You're going to be doing a lot of things that feel religious, that feel that you're doing something. And so it's going to feel like you're accomplishing something, right? That I've been very busy. I've been, sharing these Islamic things. I've been talking about these Islamic things. I've been forwarding these Islamic messages. And so it's going to end up feeling like you did a lot. But when in reality, you may not have done any of the actual actions that you need to be doing, whether it be dua, whether it be giving charity, whether it be extra prayer, whether it be sitting and contemplating or reading Quran. So be very careful about, because again, because we're going to be cut off from people, the phone is going to be that much more tempting. And so we're going to consume a lot of content. And if we're not careful, we might just end up scrolling through tons of content, not actually processing it. And then when we're done, we're going to feel like, hey, I did a lot. Now it's time to take a break. So don't confuse motion for action. Make sure that your actions are locked in and that they're consistent. Now, the last thing that I wanted to focus on in this theme, this month of blessing, the mindset of taqwa, the value of making sure that we're consistently acting, even if it's small. Now, the third thing is the ritual. What action items should we actually be focusing on? Where should we direct this extra energy, this extra time? Again, there's a trade-off, right? We're trading off less time in the masjid. We're trading off less time with family, less time with friends. Where do we make up? What's the other end of that trade-off? And the other end of that trade-off is one word, and that is Quran. And that is it. And that should be where we put all of that time and all of that energy. The Quran is the biggest source of barakah that we have. Excuse me. Reading the Quran, every single letter we get blessings. The more that we recite it, the more blessing that we get. And so what does Quran look like in this month? And so it depends. It depends on what your relationship with the Quran is now and how you're going to increase that in this month. And so it's going to be different for different people. So, for example, if you can't read the Quran, right, you don't know how to read the Arabic script, then maybe your connection with the Quran this month is reading the translation cover to cover, and then maybe doing your best to take a class that's available online and learning how to read, right? If you know how to read, you already know how to read the Arabic script, I would say that at a minimum, your goal should be to complete the recitation of the Quran cover to cover in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he used to recite the Quran during Ramadan to the angel Jibreel. And so, at a minimum, find a way to complete that recitation cover to cover. And especially if you've spent the year more or less disconnected from the Quran, where you're not reading it on a daily basis, where maybe you haven't completed a khatm of the Quran since last Ramadan. So if that is your current situation, then make sure that you make it a goal to at least complete a full recitation cover to cover. Now, if you're someone that says, well, I recite the Quran once a month as a general habit, that's my relationship with the Quran, well, then find a way to double down or triple down on that commitment. And so if you already recite it every month, then maybe this month you double down, recite it twice. If you want to, if you have the capacity and you have already a track record of doing more, then maybe you can read it once a week. But whatever your current relationship with the Quran is, this is that place to now focus that energy. Again, mastering those basics, being consistent, put as much energy as you can into increasing that recitation of Quran. Now, beyond that, find a way to listen to a recitation of Quran, especially if you struggle to read. Finish listening to one recitation cover to cover. And then again, best case scenario, maybe you do both. Maybe you're reading once and listening once. If you want to go a step further, and again, I want you to see how we're building on. What I don't want to do is to get diverted. Don't divert your extra time and attention to, well, this month I'm going to learn Arabic, or this month I'm going to sit and study a tafsir, or doing something else. But focus on how you can better that relationship with the Quran, because this is the time that you're not going to get back. Because again, we have that trade-off. You have that ability to worship in solitude, and it is the month of Quran, so find a way to double and triple down. Take the next step and memorize. Find a way to maybe reestablish that habit of memorizing the Quran, or memorize something that is of special significance that carries an extra blessing. So, for example, if you have not yet memorized Surah Mulk, this is a great opportunity to memorize Surah Mulk, because this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said that it protects a person from the punishment in the grave. It's something that we're encouraged to recite, to read every night. If if memorizing Surah Mulk is overwhelming, if because maybe you haven't memorized in a long time, or you only have memorized short surahs, and so you don't have that muscle of knowing how to memorize Quran. Well, then focus on something easier. Maybe memorize the last two ayat of Surah Baqarah. Something again that we're encouraged to recite every night. If you've memorized maybe a couple of juz, you have a little bit of that memorization muscle, then maybe this becomes the month in which you memorize Surah Al-Kahf, something that we're encouraged to recite every Friday. And so whatever your current situation is, take into account your current relationship with the Quran, and then find a way. How can I now increase that relationship? How can I double or triple or quadruple my relationship with the Quran? And again, the biggest trap is going to be, don't let yourself get distracted. This is not the month to take out the tafsir book or those books that you bought in English explaining certain surah. Those things are all great and they're all valuable. But this, again, when we want to go with the theme of that month of barakah, get the barakah of just your recitation of the Quran, increase your companionship with the Quran, be someone that's attached to the Quran, reading it as much as possible, reciting it as much as possible, memorizing if you can, doing all of these things. And in that way, we captured the barakah of this month, the barakah of the month of Ramadan. And so, even though we're quarantined, even though we have different challenges, we remember that this month, although it's a different challenge, it gives us a different area of focus. And we want to make sure that we maximize that area of focus by having that mindset of cultivating taqwa, the true purpose of fasting, having that value of making sure that whatever we do, we're consistent in it, and focusing our ritual, the action that we do, onto our relationship with the Quran. So I hope, inshallah, that this advice is beneficial. This advice is useful in terms of making sure that we can make the most of this Ramadan with this new and different situation that we are in. Okay, inshallah. So I think, oh, go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh, for that advice. We really appreciate it. Some of the takeaways that I had, especially for someone like myself who's played sports their whole life, I really enjoy those sports analogies. So, I definitely want to thank you for that. And I'm sure our audience definitely, got a couple of takeaways for that as well. And also kind of not to overwhelm ourselves. So kind of just, taking it day by day, doing as much as we can, but at the same time, not to kind of overwhelm ourselves with that. So, we definitely want to thank you for that. There are some questions that came in, from our audience. So we want to go ahead and jump into those questions. And then, for those that are watching, please ask your questions on YouTube and also on Facebook as well. And then we'll try our best to have Sheikh Omar answer those questions. So the first question that came in, it looks like this one is from Facebook. So it says, based on what you were saying about forwarding messages on social media, please shed some light on these messages on Facebook and WhatsApp about doing a chain of tasbih or ayat karima or a chain of million istighfar, like read it and forward it to continue the chain. So that's the question that someone asked.
It's probably a question better for Sheikh Muhammad. But I would say, in general, and please don't apply this to every single message that you see, but in general, some of those are dubious, and I would be very cautious or careful about anything you see forwarded on WhatsApp. Um, if if you see something like that and you're not sure, try to consult your imam and see if it is indeed something that's authentic, something that is actually grounded in some type of text from the Quran or Sunnah that says that to do this type of an action. But I would just be very cautious about forwarding those types of things. It again, speaking in generality, a lot of them they are just kind of things that are made up that often do not have a basis and are not attributed to any type of actual text or source, but they just kind of gain popularity. So I would be very cautious of those types of things, but just verify and validate before forwarding something.
How about next question is how about finishing the ongoing recitation? Do we do an extra recitation? So I'm guessing this person is already reciting the Quran. I guess do you recommend it to kind of just finish that and then start over again, or just kind of start from the beginning and continue?
That's a good question. So I would say if they're already in the habit of reciting, yeah, if you can do an extra recitation, that's great. I might look at it this way. So if you're doing an ongoing recitation now, so look at how much you're reading on a daily basis. So for example, if you're reading one juz every day, then maybe try to increase that as much as you can. Maybe it's one and a quarter, maybe it's one and a half, maybe it's two. But whatever you're doing now, make sure that you increase in Ramadan. Or if you're finishing the Quran every 2 months, maybe when you finish, try to squeeze in an extra recitation if you can during the month of Ramadan itself. But again, I mean that's a good habit and a good question to ask. But whatever you're reciting now, I wouldn't worry as much about finishing, but just increasing your daily portion would be very useful.
Jazakallah khair for that. The next question, I'm not sure this is a question or comment. It says that some ulama says it is not the quantity, rather do a small portion and understand it and build a strong relationship. That way, memorize a small surah. So, what is your take on, or whether if it's more about quantity or quality, when it comes to reciting the Quran in Ramadan?
So I would say not to get too caught up in splitting hairs on like one or the other. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that for every letter you recite, you get 10 hasanat, right? And he said, and I don't mean that uh, alif lam, like I think it was alif lam mim is one word or one harf, but alif, lam, mim, each of them have their own hasanat, and so there is a reward and a barakah simply for just the act of reciting in and of itself, right? So there's a blessing and a barakah just in the actual recitation of the Quran. And so in this month, when we have that ability, we should be reciting as much as possible. Now, yes, I understand some people might say that you want to make sure that you're understanding and you need to contemplate and to reflect and all of those things. And those things are good. And if you have the ability, then do that. But in within the month itself, what ends up happening a lot of times, and I'm not speaking to what's more virtuous. I want to speak more in terms of practicality with what we end up doing. And I've done this myself where I said, for example, okay, let me spend this month trying to understand this surah, or maybe do the tafsir of this surah instead of reciting from cover to cover. And what end up happening again in practice is that following along the lecture series on that particular surah is harder to keep up with. It doesn't have that same effect sometimes in that month, and you lose some of that accountability in a sense. And so you end up not completing the recitation and also not getting that level of understanding that you're looking for. And you end up sometimes not accomplishing either one. I would say in order to keep it simple, in order to keep the goal attainable, and especially when all of us are dealing with so many other stresses and worries and things that are occupying like our mental energy, simplify as much as possible and focus on recite, recite, recite.
Jazakallah khair for that, Sheikh. That kind of reminds me about what you said earlier in the talk about, being consistent, even if it's a small deed, just be as consistent as possible with it. So, we want to thank you for that answer. The next question is from one of our Facebook viewers. It says, if we maintain our obligatory prayers properly and not able to do more than that due to work and family commitment in Ramadan, would that be sufficient? Being that it's like this person have a very busy schedule. If they can just do their prayers would that be sufficient enough for them? Or what advice do you have for them?
So my advice would be, obviously, as long as you take care of your obligations, right? You're not, uh, that's what you're accountable to. You're accountable to fulfilling your obligations. So as long as you're fasting, as long as you're praying, that's what you have to do. I would say though, um, given that it is the month of Ramadan, obviously, and it does have so much opportunity for reward, that you push yourself in this month more than you would otherwise. And so, even though work is demanding and family is demanding, and quite honestly, the weird thing for me is that normally I struggle in Ramadan because work is demanding. And so it's very hard to, like, eat suhoor, pray on time, get to work on time, be like mentally alert, deal with coworkers, come home. Like, it's very taxing. And the funny thing now is that working from home, you actually spend more time working. And so work sometimes is even more demanding, even being at home. But my advice or my encouragement would be is that, as difficult as it may be, push yourself as hard as you can, because it's going to be worth it. And if to really get that sweetness of Ramadan, the more that you're able to sacrifice, the more that you're able to push in spite of those difficulties, inshallah, the more reward that you get. So yes, you won't be accountable to not having done more beyond what's obligated on you. But I would say, to really get the benefit and to get that barakah, try to push yourself a lot more than that.
Jazakallah khairan for that advice. Our next question is: does navigating through social media, especially TikTok, decrease your ajr?
It depends what you're watching on TikTok. In and of itself, TikTok doesn't decrease your ajr, but if you're watching things you shouldn't be watching, then obviously that would be inappropriate. And also, just be aware of things like a time suck, right? Like, TikTok is very much a time suck. You open it up and you're scrolling, 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 and then you realize, like, an hour's gone by and you've just watched so many videos. So again, Ramadan is a good time to take account of these things and have, that taqwa in private, the apps that you're watching, the social media content you're consuming. This is the time to work on it. So, again, TikTok in and of itself, not bad. There's some entertaining content on there. I enjoy it sometimes, but you do have to be careful. Again, like any other entertainment medium, you have to be very careful about what you're watching.
Jazakallah khairan for that. Yeah, let me see if there's any more questions. So one question that I do have is, I know you are also a Maxwell leadership certified on that as well. For those of us that are working, what advice do you have, for someone who is looking to get into leadership, in a corporate world?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. The question was, what advice for people trying to get into leadership in the corporate world?
Yes, yes. What advice do you have for for people who are working, and then you've been to a lot of leadership seminars and trainings. What advice do you have for someone who's looking to get into leadership, with their job?
I mean, I would say in general, it's funny, the idea of focusing on the basics and master the ordinary to become extraordinary. That's really what it comes down to ultimately. Um, I always tell people this story that I used to work in a hospital, in the pharmacy, and for someone to become a pharmacist, they have to be very accomplished in their academics. They obviously did well in college, they got into pharmacy school, they did all these things and reached a certain level of status and accomplishment. So now they're all working in this hospital, but there's turnover. And so some pharmacists are leaving, some pharmacists are getting promoted, and there's like a shortage. And so I asked my dad, I'm like, why are, all these people are supposed to be really good, why is there so much turnover and this and that? And he said, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't everyone there is qualified. Everyone has the same level of competency, right? They can all come in, they can do the job equally well, more or less, because they all have attained such a high level of qualification that there's not much differentiating them. He said the thing that's differentiating them is, it kind of comes down to how much do people like working with you, or how much do people like working for you. And so, trying to move up in the corporate arena, or develop leadership, it really comes down to those core skills of how dependable are you? Like, can someone give you a task and without a lot of follow up, trust that you'll be able to deliver on those results on time? Like, do you have that type of reputation? Do you have a reputation of being someone that's easy to get along with and easy to work with? Or do you have a reputation as someone that's difficult to get along with or difficult to work with or that presents roadblocks or someone that's negative? So it's a lot of these things about how people perceive you based on their working relationship with you that affects your ability to lead in the corporate arena. And what happens a lot of times is people do get promoted that might not be from a technical let's take a an IT arena for example. Someone might get promoted to a management level or a product advisor or something like that, even though they're not as good at coding or not as good at some of the more technical skills as other people, but they get promoted because they have the soft skills. And so someone seeking to grow their leadership and progress in the corporate arena, I would say really focus in on those soft skills in terms of how you deal with people, the results that you're able to get while maintaining professionalism and being respectable. Uh, all those things do end up mattering a lot. They are kind of those general leadership type of characteristics, uh, but it's really being able to outshine others on those particular skills that helps you a lot.
Jazakallah khairan for that, Sheikh. You also mentioned that typically in Ramadan is a challenge for you to balance between going into work and also with the duties that we have in the month of Ramadan as well. Being that most of us will be working from home, and you mentioned that it might actually be more of a challenge, to balance both. What are some practical tips and advices that you have for those that will be working from home and trying to balance a Ramadan schedule, make it productive as well?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of the challenges about Ramadan are the same challenges as working from home in general, but compounded. So first, like the main advice is to be ruthless with your schedule. The the thing about working from home, and this is it's both a blessing and a curse, is that you're always available, you're always on, and so you always have access to your work computer. So if I let's say decide to just go sit at my desk at 7 a.m., I'm naturally going to open my work computer and start checking my email, even though I might not have to start working till 8 o'clock. And in the evening time, let's say my day ends at 5. Well, if I'm doing stuff, I might just work naturally into 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever the case may be, just depending on what's going on. I would say that in Ramadan in particular, be very ruthless with your schedule. So be very particular about what time you start and what time you finish, and make sure that you're starting on time, and that you're then when it's time to finish that you're actually finishing, that you're physically like don't just close the lid of your laptop, like actually shut it down. And have yourself on some type of a schedule as to when you're waking up, when you're eating. Are you going back to sleep after Fajr? Do you have time to sleep, after Fajr? When your day is done in the evening, how much time do you have before iftar? Do you need to take a nap? Is that your time for Quran? Make that schedule for yourself, and then do your best to stick to it as much as possible. And especially if you have family at home and the kids are homeschooling as well, that's a whole different set of challenges. But make that include your family in that schedule. What time are the kids doing homework? What time are they getting to relax? What time, have all those things documented. Now, look, the thing is, you're not going to stick to that schedule every single day. You're obviously things change, things get modified, but at least have a goal that this is the schedule I'm supposed to stick to, and you have something guiding you to help you balance out the day as much as you possibly can. And then the other thing again is, like I said in the beginning, have grace with yourself, have mercy with yourself, and just know that this is a different situation. Things are going to change, things are going to happen that aren't always going to be in our control. And so during the week, things get hectic and you get behind. That's fine. That's okay. Excuse me. But then when you have time off, for example, on the weekend, then try to make up for it. Try to make up for that lost time. The other thing that I would recommend, and this is something that people don't think about a lot, but I would highly encourage people to start thinking about doing this is use some of your vacation time at work to just do Ramadan stuff. And so that might be randomly taking 2 Wednesdays off in Ramadan to give yourself a break just to catch up on sleep, but then also to have a day where you don't have anything else scheduled except your ability to focus on the things that you wanted to work on during Ramadan. Maybe you take a couple of Fridays off. Maybe you're taking the last 10 days off. But find a way to use vacation time, especially because now a lot of us, especially those that work corporate jobs, we haven't utilized our vacation time because we've just been home. And so a lot of us that maybe had trips or spring break plans or things like that, they all got canceled. And so we have vacation time sitting around that we may have been planning to use that we're not using. Maybe it's worth using a couple of those days just to focus on our worship in Ramadan.
Jazakallah khair for that advice, Sheikh. We really appreciate it. Our next question is for people living overseas, what is preferable in terms of giving zakat? Should it be local to their country, or should they spend it somewhere else?
That has to go to Sheikh Mohammed. I can't answer that one.
Exactly. Like, I will make sure he gets on and answer that question for our viewers. Um, and then I saw you share your contact information with us. Where else can our audience, be able to find you?
IbnAbiOmar.com is the main one. That's the website with all my articles and posts and things like that. Other than that, social media, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at Ibn Abi Umar. Um, uh, and that's pretty much it. The website will have the links to those social media outlets and whatnot, but that's the best way to connect.
Are you on TikTok?
I am on TikTok, but I don't have a public account. And I don't make TikTok videos. I just consume some of the content.
Okay, fair enough. Exactly like her. So I think we're pretty much coming, to the hour mark here. I don't really see any more questions coming in. We just want to say thank you for, taking time out of your busy day. I join, sharing some practical advice with us. May Allah reward you and your family. May Allah give you, a fruitful Ramadan.
I
You're
mean,
always welcome here in our community. If there's anything you need from us, just let us know. We just want to say thank you again. Jazakallah khair for everything. And
oh, Jazakallah khair. Thanks for having me.
no problem. And then for our audience that are still, watching, just know that, as you guys can see, we are asking for donations. So please go ahead and head over to iscpa.org/donate, or you can PayPal us at treasury@iscpa.com. So that's pretty much everything. Everyone have a good night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.